Why do I need Jesus? Okay, I'm going to try to tackle this question, okay? If you're asking that question, you may not be aware of your innate propensity towards committing evil acts. Or your parents or caretakers may not have taught you right from wrong through discipline, right? And so as a result, your moral compass may be broken. Another situation you could be in possibly is that thing inside of you, that tells you what's right and wrong, called your conscience. You may have violated that so much to where God can no longer speak to you through it. So those are just a couple of reasons why we as mankind need Jesus. If you are aware of your own practices and evil habits and what the Bible would call sin, that's a really good thing, because then that means that God can still reach you and speak to you. Not saying that he can't speak to you when it's dead, because he can bring your conscience back to life, but I mean, generally speaking, better off than most other people. And I don't mean to compare you to other people, but just generally speaking. Does that make sense? Which kind of brings me to my next point. We need Jesus because everybody on the face of this world practices in some capacity sin. Right now, just to give you a general list of what sin is and just some things that maybe you can connect with and realize is, lying, stealing, cheating, murdering, manipulating, deceiving, lying. I already said that. So generally speaking, just to name a few, that's sin. Idols, worshiping other idols, any breaking of the 10 Commandments, that's all sin as well. So everybody practices those things to some capacity. I think there's a difference when you're practicing them and there's just no repentance, and when you're, I guess everybody doesn't practice them, but because when you're practicing it means you're doing it and it's no repentance, there's no turning away from it, you're just practicing it. But, as for Christians, what we try to do is we take accountability for it, we take responsibility for it, and we work with God to turn away from it. Does that make sense? So there's two different ideas there. Okay, so what you may not be aware of is the consequences for sin. Now, I'm going to roll out, God's consequence for sin, and also there is some natural consequences that come along with sin, but when God takes sin pretty seriously because of his holiness, his righteous character, and generally speaking, sin is a violation of his holiness and of his righteousness. It's an assault on who he is as a person and his holy law, right? And so I'm going to roll out again a list of consequences for sin. Number one would be mortal death, every death entering into our experience as mankind is the first consequence of sin that God assigned Adam, and that followed through Adam's bloodline, death, right? Mortal death. And then you have the second consequence, which would be for those who continue to practice sin without any turning or repentance from it, that would be called hell, right? You die in a state where you haven't repented, you haven't come clean with God, you haven't been sincere and honest with God about your sin and worked through that with him. You would place yourself in the place of hell. Not that he sends you there, but that, you are, based upon your choices and decisions, you've decided to go there. Does that make sense? So hell is a consequence. It's a place of judgment where you are being judged for the sins that you have committed against a holy God, right? And so then that's the second consequence. And then we roll out the third consequence, is where the final consequence is where God takes hell and throws it into the lake of fire. So hell and all the people that are in hell, he throws that into the lake of fire. And so that would be the final consequence for sin, for those who rebel and refuse to obey God and are being held in a place of judgment for their crimes against God, per se. Does that make sense? So for a person that does not want to experience, well, to some degree, everybody's going to experience the first one, maybe not everybody, but to the second and the third consequence, majority of the population, based upon the Bible, will experience these consequences. However, God, at his great love for mankind, has made a way out of hell, which is through Jesus Christ, right? Jesus has paid every person's sin debt, right? On the cross, he paid every person's sin debt. And so now when we accept Jesus and what he did for us on the cross, God can legally dismiss your case, right? And he can grant you everlasting life through the finished work on the cross through Jesus Christ, right? And so those will be that's kind of in a nutshell. I guess hopefully that wasn't confusing. Hopefully that was clear and concise, but that's kind of in a nutshell why we need Jesus as mankind. Does that make sense? All right, y'all. Thanks for listening. Peace out.